Hey there, this is your teacher, Mr. H, and you're watching History in a Hoodie. Today's episode is about voluntary trade, where we will learn all about how African nations participate in international trade. I can't wait to find out, so let's get this show started. What are we learning about today? The standard for today's lesson asks the students to explain how specialization encourages trade between countries. Next, we will compare and contrast different types of trade barriers such as tariffs, quotas, and embargoes. Finally, we will explain why international trade requires a system for exchanging currencies between nations. Before we start, let's go over some vocabulary for today's lesson. Trade sanctions are penalties imposed onto one country from another. Exchange rates is the value of one currency for the purpose of trading it for another currency. Specialization and trade barriers have been brought up in previous lessons. Today, we are going to focus on how they affect the economies of African countries. Nigeria is a country that specializes heavily in a single industry, oil. Just like some Middle Eastern countries, like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, Nigeria has gained wealth from fossil fuels. Where Nigeria is oil-rich, they are resource-poor as a country. Nigeria is smack dab in the middle of the Sahel. This means some agriculture, but not great agriculture. The country does have a great river system for water resources, but hasn't built up much industry outside of oil. Because they specialize in oil and are wealthy as a country, Nigeria is somewhat able to grow economically by trading oil internationally and buying food, cars, technology, cell phones, and other products from other countries. Thanks to specialization, the country is taking advantage of their resources, though they could be doing better if they would invest more in capital goods and human capital, but that's another video. During the later years of the apartheid era in South Africa, many countries around the world issued trade barriers against the country. Typically, trade barriers are used for political reasons, not economic ones, because a trade barrier creates negative economic results for both countries involved. The political reasons for the embargoes placed against South Africa were, of course, about human rights. The Afrikaner government's strict segregation and discrimination laws needed to change. And short of invasion, trade sanctions were the only pressure the international community could place on South Africa. A number of countries placed tariffs and embargoes on South Africa from the 1970s through the 1990s. This hurt the everyday people of South Africa, yes, but it also convinced them that they needed to vote in a new government that planned to abandon the apartheid laws. So the trade barriers were successful in their goal. Trade barriers are continued to be used to this day on countries that don't treat their people or their neighbors correctly. Unless that country is rich enough or powerful enough to be unaffected by the threats or actions. Here's looking at you, China. So what? Why does trade matter? In 2008, the country of Zimbabwe experienced severe economic times. They were involved in a war and couldn't afford payments on loans from other countries. On top of having a poor economy, the Zimbabwean government decided the way out of the economic collapse was to print more and more money. That's a great idea. If we can't afford things with the money we already have, let's just make more. Why didn't I think of that? Well, here's the thing. The more money they printed, the less and less valuable it became compared to other countries' monies around the world. At the worst, the US dollar was trading for a staggering sum of just over 2 billion Zimbabwean dollars. That means that it would take about 6 to 8 billion Zimbabwean dollars just to buy a loaf of bread. People started using their own currency for firewood and toilet paper because it was worth less than both. The governments around the world monitor exchange rates just to make sure that problems like in Zimbabwe don't become problems for our own countries. If Zimbabwe could just print trillion-dollar bills and turn around and spend that on goods and services in America, our economy could be ruined as well. Today, the Zimbabwean dollar is a cautionary story and also a collector's item. Who wouldn't want to own a trillion-dollar note that wasn't worth more than a couple cents? Wow, so learning about trade is really important for us to understand. I'm glad we learned it today. Are you ready for some review questions? Leading exports: Nigeria, petroleum and petroleum products. South Africa, machinery and equipment, software, cut diamonds, agricultural products, chemicals, textiles, and apparel. Which statement describes the potential trading relationship between Nigeria and South Africa? Why did a number of the countries of the United Nations place an embargo on South Africa? Suppose a country wants to protect their workers and industries from foreign competition. Which of the following would best achieve their goal? How does specialization encourage trade between nations? What is the purpose of currency in a country's economy? I hope all of you learned a lot from today's episode of History and Hoodie about Africa's participation in international trade. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Just kidding, I don't care about that stuff. But do make sure you study this lesson. Bye now.